In this video, I'm going to show you how we're going to build this crab icon really from the left side, just drawing that side only. And to do that, I'm going to show you several tools along the way that you can use in different techniques for working with shapes. So what we're looking at here is a sketch that I have done in Procreate on the iPad. And this sketch is very rough. I'm going to use this as a guideline for drawing out my vector shapes so that things are very precise, clean, and scalable, really. So I have this particular image. It's 8.5 by 11. It was exported from the app Procreate on the iPad, and I brought this into Illustrator here. And how I did that is I went up to File, Place, and imported a JPEG. So this is a JPEG image that's sitting here on layer 1. So you can see that over here on the right of the screen. So what I want to first do is double click this layer, and if it's not already checked, which it usually isn't, I want to go ahead and check template. So it's going to turn everything off. If I were to print this out right now, it would not show up. So we can see templates, the print button by default is unchecked. So it's kind of a nice way of setting things in the background, using it as a template so that I can go ahead and work with the pen tool and other tools over top. Here I'm going to dim my image. My JPEG is going to be dimmed back. We're going to ghost that back or dim it back to about 20%, and you can see things get very gray from there. Again, think of it almost like tracing paper. We're putting a layer of paper over top of another layer just so it's kind of semi-opaque. We're giving it that kind of effect. Over on layer 1, I just like to do this as a matter of practice. I'm just going to name it template image and leave it at that. And you can see it's italicized here now in the layers panel. So when templates are made, the name of the layer becomes italicized. There, it's not a template. If we check that button again, you can see the name becomes italicized and it actually gets locked as well. Kind of nice. So in order to draw, I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus button, create a new layer, and it's now called layer 2. And I'm going to double click on the name, and I'm going to name it Crab Line. We'll have several layers when we're done here. The last thing I want to do before I begin work is set up my pen tool. So I come up here to my tools panel on the left, go to my pen tool, or S on the keyboard, and then come down to my stroke. We can see we have the fill in the background, and we have the stroke. And that automatically brought up my color panel. That's going to do that here. I'm going to double click on the stroke. So just on that color area, it happens to be magenta here. It'll probably be black for you if it's default. I've already gone ahead and set it as this magenta color. It's just going to be easier to see. You can set it to whatever you want, but it's very easy to see where you're working when it's something bright and maybe a color you don't use very often. So we'll hit OK. That looks pretty good. And the last thing I want to do is set my stroke, the different settings for my stroke. So I can bring up the stroke panel. If you look up here in this menu bar at the top, I can bring up the stroke panel by just clicking on where it says stroke. That'll bring up the panel up here. It's a quick way to access things. If you don't want to do it that way, you can go down to, or go up to window and then go down to stroke. Let go and it'll bring up the same thing. So I like the quick way of doing it. Let me go ahead and close that and come up here again. And I'm going to go ahead and set the weight of my line. I'm going to go something a little bit smaller, like 0.35 points PT. So it's going to make it much thinner than the default, which is 1 point. I'm going to set my cap to round. I just like the endings of my lines to be rounded. Corner, I'm going to also set that to round, the join. So it's a round join. And then I'm going to leave everything else as is. So 0.35, round, round. So we're ready to work now. So the first thing that I do is I set a few parameters, a few settings for this particular line. Kind of a quick way of doing it, almost a style sheet for my line. So I can use it again later if something gets messed up. I can easily reset everything to my preferred setting. So I'm going to click. I'm just going to make a triangle here. There's really no reason. One line would work fine. I just make a triangle out of habit. And if we zoom in on the triangle, we can see now we have rounded corners, not real sharp at the end. And we also, if we did a single line, you would see that we have rounded end caps here. So the lines start rounded and end rounded. Okay, so I got that down. What I want to do is I want to make a graphic style with this so that, again, I can use it later. I'm going to select that shape. I can just use my selection tool up here, the black arrow, select it by clicking on it. Going over to my graphic styles panel, you can disregard all of these, and really simply I'm just going to take this shape and drag it. I'm using a mouse into there. Now you can see when I dragged it in, you can see there's a plus. On the Mac you'll see a little plus. I'm not sure what it's like on the Windows platform, but it should be similar. And then that'll allow me to add it. So I've added it here. You can kind of faintly see it. And I'm going to double click on it and name it pink line 0.35 pt. You're not required to do that. I just like it. I like to keep things pretty organized, like I was naming my layers. So got that done. I can delete that shape now. So if I start drawing, let's just say I was drawing and I accidentally was working on things and I shifted some things around. And let me get my stroke again. Let's mess this up a little bit. Let's give it a few other settings. So it looked like that. If I want to reset things to that pink line with the rounded corners, I could just come over to my graphic styles panel with the object selected, click it, and it takes it back down to the style that I set up. So that's a graphic style there. Very easy to set up. All right, so let's get into creating this crab. I'm going to center things up a little bit. I'm going to work pretty quickly. I have other videos where I show all the commands and things, but I'll talk my way through it. Maybe I'll tell you which commands I'm holding down while I'm working. So we're going to draw this left half of the crab, and then we're going to use it, what we've drawn, to mirror it so we can create the other half in just a few clicks. And I will show you some techniques for knocking shapes out of other ones. So kind of like if you've ever made cookies, for example, and you use a cookie cutter and you want to cut through a shape, or maybe a jack-o'-lantern, Halloween, you're cutting into the pumpkin. It's the kind of thing. We're creating a hole through it with some of these shapes. So these internal shapes are going to be transparent. Actually, they're going to be completely empty. So it would be like a window, but I'll explain that as we go. So let's start with a point that's pretty simple. I like to start maybe right over here. I'm going to keep things very straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click. That's my first point. I'm going to hold down my shift key, and that's going to constrain it. You can see holding down shift constrains it to 45-degree increments by default. Okay, so this is drawing a nice straight line. That way when we mirror it, it will look a little bit more natural. Things will align a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and click and then drag while I have the mouse down. So I'm going to click here right before it goes into this curve. So let's set a point here, and then I'm going to drag, and I'm drawing from right to left, so counterclockwise here. Okay. Actually, I guess I would be doing clockwise. Yeah, clockwise. I'm drawing clockwise. So I'm holding down the shift key to keep this handle, these little things that look like lollipops coming off the side with the circles in them. I'm going to go ahead and hold down the shift key. That's going to draw out a handle. And you can see when I let go, that this is not yet a line. It's kind of a guide that they give you, almost like a rubber band. It shows you a curvature here because this handle was set. So this will make more sense. I'm going to click here on a corner. And what I want to do is to make sure that this aligns perfectly all the way up to this corner. I'm going to go ahead and click here. So I'm just clicking. I'm not doing anything else with the handles or anything right now. I'm just clicking. This one I probably will click and shift click again a little bit to the right here. Just a little bit to give a little curve. So there we go. I'm going to click and I'll close that. So now we have this shape, or this line that's drawn to kind of show a shape where the shape would be. Okay, so I'm going to kind of show you a few ways to draw this very quickly. There are traditional ways where we have the handle down here. If you see, I'm holding down the command key. On the PC, it would be the control key. And I can remember where I put these points. So I put a point here. You can really just go to where the corners are. So this is where it bent. And if I click that, it brings up all of the points again. And I'm going to hold down the command key. It's going to switch temporarily from my pen tool to this tool, the direct selection tool. I'll often call it just the white arrow. Hold down shift and pull again to the left. What I'm trying to do is get this to roughly align with this line, the drawn line underneath, the sketch line. And that's why you really want to draw your sketches, your refined sketches, as close to actual lines as possible. Now these lines are a little bit thick for me. They're not really well defined, but it's enough information for me to do what I need to do. So I'm going to come up here again, hold down command, and it's the direct selection tool. I'm going to click on this point and reposition it. So I can move that point. I'm holding down my left mouse button, and I'm just going to reposition it. I kind of want it to flow a little bit better. So this curve is perfectly fine. I actually like it. I know it's more precise than my drawing. I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to show you another little tool here. So I'm going to hold down the Option key on this line segment right on the middle. It doesn't have to be in the middle, but it's a good place to start. So I'm going to go right to the middle of this line segment between this point and this point, and I'm going to hold down Option or Alt on the PC, and you can see that I have a new icon that shows up with the direct, or actually the selection tool. So we see it's turned into the black arrow, and we get this little icon. It has 2 points with a little curve. That is just letting us know that we can, while hovering over this line and holding down the mouse button, we can bend that. And what it does is it gives us 2 new handles off the adjacent points. So you can see the little lollipop handles there. I'm still holding down Option. I can grab the handle now and tweak things on either side. I can even shorten it. I can elongate it, get a new curve in there, you can see. So it's really just made up of points and handles to make these curves. Now we can see up here I have a slight curve coming down here in this area. I'm just going to leave that as is. I know this is straight because I held down the Shift key coming from this point before I set the next point, that ending point. Okay, so we just have a few curves in there. I think that shape looks pretty good. Let's draw the other shapes very quickly. So this is pretty straight. I'm just setting straight points here. And what I'm going to do here is I know that there's a slight curve in here. Maybe I want to match it just slightly. So I'm going to click and drag again. So I'm clicking and dragging just a little bit, just to get that curve off to the left there. You can see it's like a seesaw actually right now. But I have a slight curve. And while it's still held down, so you kind of have to pay attention to holding down your mouse and trying different things, or your left button. Hold down the Option or Alt key and it lets you change the direction in which the next segment will be drawn. So you can see I can go in any direction here. Just by holding down Option or Alt, it removes that seesaw. So you see the seesaw here, equal sides going up and down. Option or Alt, go in the direction I want, and then close everything up. You can see it's now closed. So I'll show you that. How do we know it's closed? I'll show you here. Let's do this. Let's go very quickly with this using Illustrator's built-in that curve tool that we knew, or that we tried. We click, click. I'm just going to set up all my corners first. Any place where things shift drastically. So those are the corners. And then I'm going to go back in, holding down my Option or Alt. Still in the pen tool, it'll temporarily go to this tool again. And I will drag this into position so I can move it anywhere. And I'm going to try to get it as close as possible. And I think that's pretty good. Let's come up here and do the same thing. Hold down the Option or Alt key. It'll give us temporary access. We get those handles, these little lollipops again off the side. We'll do it here. Very slight curve. And we'll do it here. So anytime we hover over a segment, it will do that. Now I told you, how do we know it's closed? Well, I'll show you now. Let's do this again the same way we just did the other one. Just setting my corner points. Much easier this way. You can draw so many different ways, but maybe I'll show you some other techniques. And then when we go to close, you can see there is a little circle that comes off of the pen tool. When I get close to that beginning point to close things up, that just means we're going to close the path. We're going to close this whole thing. Lines are also called paths. Holding down my Option key on the Mac, Alt key on Windows. I'm going to bend things in. This has just a tiny bit, almost imperceptible. There we go. Let's do this one just a tiny bit. That looks okay. I kind of want these to align, so maybe I bring it down a little bit, just so it's naturally looking like it's going at the same angle. And I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll drag this point over here, holding down my Command key there, or Control key to access that point. And still holding down my Command or Control key, I can affect the curvature here. Let's go back to this one and just pull that in. Option key held down or Alt key on PC. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's turn off the template image temporarily. So this doesn't have an eyeball over here in the layers panel. We'll just click on this rectangle and that will turn it off. And that looks pretty good. Let's draw this circle next. Pretty easy. We can use tools that are already there for us. We go into the rectangle tool. We can start with an ellipse. And we're going to position our cursor right about where we think the center is and hold down our Option or Alt key and Shift. And when we do that, it will drag out a circle or draw a circle from the center. Now that we have it drawn, we can come back to our selection tool. And we can choose to move it around if we wanted to reposition it a little bit better, if we like that positioning there. Okay, we got several more things to draw, and then I'm going to show you how to make things solid, so no longer lines, and then we'll knock out the shapes and be done with the crab. So I'm going to go very quickly now that we're understanding these concepts, techniques. Click, click, click. I'm going to not worry so much about where the curve is right now. I'm just going to click up where they would meet, and I'm going to come down and close it. So we see that icon again. Click, and it's closed. Hold down the Option key here, drag out, position this. I don't know if this is like a tusk or something. I don't know what it would be. It was just artistically added. It was a creative decision. Let's do the same thing. Option or Alt over that segment, pull it into place. So that actually looks pretty good. I might round things out a little bit towards the end. In fact, I'll do it right now. I'll show you what we can do. Let's click on this point holding down Command or Control and then moving it into a better position. I think that works a little bit nicer. If we look up here in the corner, it's kind of hard to see, it's red, so let me change the layer color. I'm going to double click on the layer next to the name off to the right, and I'll just pick maybe dark blue so we can see the line. There we go. So you can change your layer color to see things a little bit easier. If we click on that with the command tool, that point, you can see this little donut shape. If you don't see that donut shape, come up to View, and where it says Hide Corner Widget, it will probably say Show Corner Widget. So I don't want to hide mine, I want to show it. Let's click on it again. And then we can go over this little donut shape, and when we do, we see our cursor change as this curve. If you click that and start dragging inward, you'll see things get more rounded out from that point. So I like to do that. I like to round things out just a little bit so that they're not so sharp. There we go. And you can do that with any corner. So if you click on this corner, you see it there. If you click on this corner, you see it there. Because this illustration is largely intended to be geometric, I'm going to leave most of it as is. This is the leg of the crab, the front claw. It's part of it. And what I'm going to do here is something a little bit different. So you think you have to trace around the outside and then do all the inner pieces, but since Illustrator works with shapes, we can combine this later. So what I'm going to do is treat this as an entirely different shape. And it's so I can get straighter edges where things cross and align. So we can see right here, this little wedge here, this is going to be cut out and see-through. And it will be borrowing this edge from this internal shape. It'll make sense in a second here. So let's click. I can come anywhere inside this shape, and you'll see why in a second. Let's click and just, we're going to imagine that our point comes to right about here. We can always adjust it. So I'm coming inside of the crab's main body, and you look at it and you say that's not part of the illustration. Why does it look like that? Well, I'll show you here in just a second. What we're going to do, just to make things easier, we're going to come over here. We're going to deselect. I just held down Command and clicked off. I'm going to come over to this point here, and I'm just going to close it for now. So I'm not going to worry about it being straight even at this point. You'll see why later. And I'm going to take this shape, now it's closed, and I'm going to take this shape, also closed. So two separate shapes. I'm going to shift click, and I'm going to have both shapes selected now. So they're both selected by holding down shift and clicking while on one, clicking on the other. We're going to open up Window Pathfinder, and you can see the Pathfinder panel here. I'm going to bring this out just so we can see it. Let's close the transform panel there. And we can see that there's several icons here. We will use several of these as we go, but right here, unite, we want to take these two shapes and unite them into one. And we had to close that first shape to make this work properly. So let's go ahead and click unite, this first one. And now you can see when we clicked that, it combined the two shapes. Okay. So we don't want to do that just yet because we want to have this inner part here. All right, so I'm going to show you another technique. It's a lot more fun, I think, and I didn't learn it until fairly recently. So let's close Pathfinder. Let's come in here and let's draw this inner shape. And to do that, it's kind of hard to keep your mind focused and wrapped around everything here. I'm going to go ahead and drag or draw the shape. I'm coming inside the crab's body and inside the crab's leg here. And I'm just going to go ahead and do this, kind of like we were drawing other shapes. Option and drag this. So we're bending that again. We're bending that curve into place, holding down Option or Alt. So we have that. So this is a shape, this is a shape, and this crab is a shape. So now that I have all of those drawn, I'm just going to leave them as is for now. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. Let's draw the rest using the same techniques. Let's draw the rest of the leg here. I'm going to click. The claws, I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to go ahead and drag where there would be an imaginary point. Sometimes I would draw that in there, but where would they come to a point up there? I'm just going to imagine for the purposes of this. So we can see we're just piecing things together. Hold down Option, work on these curves. I can go ahead and bend these into shape. I love this tool. For a long time they didn't have this in Illustrator. Not too worried about how it looks here. It looks a little weird right now, but Option held down and using my left mouse button, dragging that in. We have this shape in here as well. Let's go ahead and do a similar technique to what we did on the other shape that was inside, down on the other part of the leg. And Option held down or Alt on the PC again. Just dragging this in. You can work pretty quickly doing this. I have this shape in here. It's cutting into the leg. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, what am I going to do here? I think I'll just leave it for now. We'll come back to that. Let's draw this shape up here. So I'm going to come outside of the claw. And I'm going to click through here. This is a little more angular in here. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to look a little more aggressive, maybe a little dangerous here. If you've ever been pinched by a crab, not fun. So we have that shape. We don't have to worry about what it looks like outside of this because this is all going to be removed. So we can actually do that right now. Let's use the Pathfinder panel again for this easy task. We'll bring that up. We'll select this shape, which is now, because we drew it second, it's seen as being on top or overlapping the shape underneath. So we have that one selected and we hold down Shift and we select the other part of the claw here, the main part. We don't need the inner part. And we come over to the Pathfinder panel. And we can see here that we have minus front. That's the second one over here. If we click that, it removes what was seen as being the overlapping element, the thing that was in front. So we have the layers panel, but we also have a stacking order that Illustrator uses. We can't see that. Everything looks flat on screen, but Illustrator is actually overlaying elements. And we can kind of see that. Let's go back just for a second. We're going to undo that. We can kind of see that if we twirl things down. So if we come over to Crab Line in the Layers panel and we hit this little icon, you can see if you click on this little target circle next to each path, it just names them as paths. You can rename these, by the way. You can double click on them and rename them. But you can see this one is over top of this one and this one. And it remembers the order that we've drawn things. And you can move the order around if you want to. You can drag it and put it there. Now we have this one. This is the next one in order. And now this one's the next one in order. So there's a stacking order that you don't always get to see, but it comes in handy for a lot of things. So get used to understanding the stacking order. Let's close that. We're back to where we are. We're going to click on this one, shift click on this one, and go back to where we were subtracting or minus front here in Pathfinder. So we got everything drawn there. Let's finish up. I'm going to do this pretty quickly now. You understand most of these techniques. So I'm just going to click These are going to be pretty much straight angles all the way through. I'm just going to put this next one here. Simple clicking and kind of like connect the dots. Now I can come to the end. I can hold down my command or control key and drag these in a little bit. Remember that little donut shape? That's going to round the corner. Got that pretty easily. We're going to come over here. This is going to be the fun part. I love curves here. So we're going to click, click. Let's put up one over here. You're going to think, this is crazy. Why would you put one over there? You have to get this curve in here. I'll show you in a second. So we got this shape in here. Now we could draw another shape over top and try to connect it and do all that. But let's first start with that little curve segment tool. So if we come over top with the pen tool, we hold down the Option key, we get this again. So let's pull this down, and I'm going to put it right about down here. Now these handles are getting pretty long, so let's try to work with them. I'm going to hold down Command or Control temporarily. Try to get it in place over here. So we're coming out of this point into the curve, and it looks pretty good. It's lining up. Let's try the same thing with the other side. And you can see what's happening now. So curves affect other curves. To get around that, very simple. Take the pen tool and put another point. So if I hover over top, because I have the pen tool selected, it's going to automatically give me this little symbol, the plus sign. If I hold down Option, I get this again, the curve tool. So let's click on this and just put a point in. I'm putting a point here because this is where it's most in the center down here, the bottom of the curve. So now I've just added a new point that has new handles. Now let's try coming back over Command or Control and bending this in. A lot of people want to go ahead and start bending this one, but don't do that. Resist the temptation to do that right away. Come on over here. Let's do that. Let's bring this down as close as we can. It already looks pretty good. Remember, my drawing is loose and hand drawn, so it's not going to be as precise. But now that we got that in place, maybe we want it to tweak. We want to tweak it just a little bit more. We can take this point now, this handle, and drag it a little bit to the right. And we can start tweaking things. So actually, I'm going to get a little bit more aggressive here. I'm going to put this in here as best I can, and now I'm going to drag this handle. I'm even going to click on this point and move the point, maybe just a little bit. And this is how you can refine things. You can move the points and the handles and change the relationship between all of them to get the best result. So I'm getting pretty good here. I think that looks pretty good for the most part. You can even change the angle of the handles, so we get sometimes a little bit smoother result by just changing the angle. Let's bring this down. So you can add as many points as you want, but the trick to really getting good results with drawing in vectors, the trick is to use as few points as possible. So I get a little bit into the details here. Again, the curve that I'm drawing here in the computer is probably a lot better than what I did by hand. Let me show you a little technique here. Click. If we click here, we can do the adding of the point while we draw. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and drag to the right. So this time I'm drawing counterclockwise. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to come back, hold down my Command key. Again, if you hold down Command, Option, Shift, or Control, Alt, Shift, that group of tools, holding down different things at different times, will give you the best results when you're drawing vectors. And those are really the common command keys. I'm holding down Command and Shift right now, constraining everything to the horizontal. Gives me a nice smooth curve. I can now move the points, move the curves. It's really just toggling between all of these commands. This is a really long handle. So what can I do? I can come up here and hold down my Option key and drag out new handles. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down Shift. Then I'm going to let go of Shift and Option, or Shift and Alt on the PC. I'm going to let go. I'm going to come back in with my Option or Alt key held down, and I'm going to just give this a slight handle there. I'm going to come over to this one too and do that there. And now I can shorten my handle. So you're using the handles to make the curve. A handle off this point and a handle off this point. So if you're ever struggling, sometimes go back to the corner point, add some handles, especially where it changes direction very rapidly, very quickly, abruptly. You can get a better result if you simply add a handle to it. Okay, so I'm not really impressed with what I'm doing here, but you can see I'm dragging this handle down here, and then I'll come up and hold down my Option key or Alt key and bring that one down because we shifted directions so quickly. Whoops, didn't want to do that. That's what I love about this, is you can correct things and you can tweak things really all day if you wanted to, but I'm not saying you should. You want to reach a point where things look pretty good. Let's turn off the template image. Yeah, it could use some refining. I see things down in here, for example. This could probably be a little bit nicer. Same with this one. That's a really long handle, by the way. So you want to try to keep your handles relatively short, and you want to keep the points as few as possible in your drawing. So we can see that here. Let's see. Maybe if I come down, I'll get a steeper curve here. Looks kind of nice. Let's see if I just tweak it like that. That looks a little bit nicer. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it looks good. Okay, let's turn on the template image, and I'm going to draw another circle again from the center here. Go into Option, Shift, drag out, and there we go. We got a circle. I'm just going to move it just a little bit. Turn off our template image, and now we have our crab drawn. Okay, so next what we're going to do is combine the shapes that need to be combined, and we're going to knock certain shapes out of other ones. So I could show you some of the techniques working with the Pathfinder tool, but a lot of people resort with something that's very simple to the Shapebuilder tool. So let me show you the Shapebuilder tool. I did show you the Pathfinder. We knocked out, or we did the minus front on this part of the claw up here. So that's how you can use the Pathfinder tool. And sometimes you need to make a copy of a shape so that you can retain the other part of the shape. But right now I'm going to show you probably the most fun part of combining shapes. So before we do that, or actually let's just do it first because we want to do all the work that we can here. Let's make a copy by dragging over the plus sign, the crab line layer, and I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to call this Crab Shapes so that I can go back at any time. It's in here, crab line, if I need it. All right, Crab Shapes. Let's drag around everything with the selection tool, the black arrow tool, and select everything that you want to combine using the Shapebuilder tool. So what is the Shapebuilder tool? It's a really easy way of dragging through the shapes that you want to combine and then deleting some of the shapes that you want to get rid of. So let me show you that in action here. I've got everything selected. I'm going to come up here to my tools panel on the left, go down to the Shapebuilder tool. So you'll see it if you hover over. You'll get a tool tip. But it says Shapebuilder tool here, and it's these two little circles with dots in it and the direct selection tool. So we have that selected, and while it's selected and my artwork selected, everything I want to combine or work with, I can Hover over top of shapes and you can see them light up here in gray. So it's like little, it's almost like an old school Mac fill when you used to have just a black and white Mac, no color screens in the very early days. So let me show you quickly how we can zoom in here and we can work with these. So we know that this part of the claw is going to be combined. This part, and this part to start with. Let's do that. So we're going to click on this first gray area, or not click on it, but hover over it, turns gray. And while it's hovered over, we can hold down our left mouse button and drag through. You can see a little line. See this little line moving around? You can drag through the shapes that you want to designate to be combined. And that's what, when you let go, that's what you get. We can do it with this shape. This part of the claw will be connected to this part. So it sees it all as one shape and it combines it there. So you can see we just really easily combined these shapes. Let's go over here. We want this main part of the shell. Again, it's enclosed. It's a good thing that we enclosed it. We want to drag, holding down the mouse button, through these parts, letting go. And then we want this part of the claw to be connected to this part. Now, if you were colorizing things, you can colorize with the Shapebuilder tool. You can also use the live paint. But you can use the Shapebuilder tool to also colorize. So let's see right here. We have the stroke. I could come in here and say I wanted orange. I could colorize that just by clicking on it, and it would leave the line around it too. Or maybe I want this to be yellow. Because they're separate shapes right now, we can see that when we're hovering over and they're lighting up here. We can treat them separately. So let me do Command Z again. So we're undoing. Control Z on the PC. We're going to combine these. So I do want this part to be combined with this part. We're just making a one color logo here, or one color icon. Let's drag through those two shapes, and now they're combined. Now, why did it go to yellow? Because we had a fill color already designated. Let's uncheck that or unfill it. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and just set that back with nothing selected. So that's what it looks like. We got everything filled in, ready to go. All the shapes are combined. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of this, go around it, and I'm going to see that I have separate shapes here. Okay? So we got this shape, we got this one right here is all one part. So I'm moving it out of the way actually. Sorry, I'm in isolation mode. So I'm moving that part. Now you can see there's double ups here, and that's one of the things I don't really like. So to get around that, what I normally do is I select the shape, I delete it, Command X, or just hide it or lock it. Command 2 is locking. And then I will go in and delete those shapes. So Command 2, for example, I can use the lasso tool, and I can come in here, and I knew that these were shapes. You could actually do the whole thing like this too, and it would just show you what's in there. It's usually the internal shapes that you have to worry about. So what it does is the Shapebuilder tool, it punches through all the pieces. So if you have two pieces that are stacked, you'll get two different shapes left behind. Even though it will be punched through, it's going to look at it as punching through two different shapes and leaving a piece. So that should be good. I'm going to do Command Option 2. That will unlock everything, and let's test it. Now let's move it. Yep. So sometimes you'll get little stray points. You can also, sometimes people like to combine all the shapes. So you'll take everything that is got some doubles on it. select it, and then use this tool here, Unite. But the problem with that is the internal shapes sometimes get wrapped up into it. So I'm not going to talk with you too much about that, but that's how you can do it. So we got that, and we got this, and we got this particular thing. So let's fill it with color now. So I'm going to take this one, and instead of having this stroke color, I'm going to turn that off temporarily, and you can see there's nothing there. To see what everything looks like, even when it's invisible, Command Y will show you this outline view. So I call it construction line view because it's showing all the construction lines, even though there's no, whether you see no fill and you see no stroke color there. So Command Y or Control Y on the PC will toggle between the two, but you'll see the construction lines. They just happen to be filled with nothing. The shapes are still there. So now I'm going to fill it with a predetermined swatch here. Let's go into this blue here. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to check this global here. I just want it to be a global color so I can reuse it and change it later very easily. So we have the lines now, and you can see they're sharp and they have all the things that we didn't do before. So if I wanted to go back in graphic styles, if I wanted to just take it back to the pink lines that we used, I could do that. Let's come up into swatches. Let's turn off the stroke. Let's go to the fill. That's this swatch little square in the background. It's also happening over here in the tools panel. And let's click on the blue. And there we go. So we do the same thing. These don't have any punched through shapes. I'll show you what that punching through means, or cookie cutter looks like, in a second. Let's turn that off, and we'll colorize these. Same thing, let's remove the pink. Let's just colorize all these. There we go. So here's a problem that people run into. If we do Command Y, we can see we have a ring down in here. We have this kind of horseshoe shape. Still, I'm not a fan of what's going on in it. I think it's a little wonky, but we have the circle and this horseshoe shape inside the tail fin of the crab. Command Y, we can't see it. That's because it has not been punched through this back shape. So let's use the Pathfinder tool in this case. What we're going to do is go to Command Y. We're going to select the two objects. So Shift click, select the circle. We have them both selected. I'm just going to make them orange for now. And Command Y again. So that's one way you could colorize things again. You don't have to. There's other techniques to do it that way. But you could use Shapebuilder tool again right now. But I'm going to show you how to use the Pathfinder panel. Let's click these two. And right now, Illustrator sees them as two separate objects. Remember the stacking order. It sees them as totally separate. We want to combine them into a single unit so that when we punch through, it punches through both objects, not just one. So what do I mean by that? Let's come into, let's select the Pathfinder panel again. And we can see that. It was just hiding behind the swatches panel. If we select the blue, so shift click on the blue also, so we have three objects selected now. This one, and this one. If we hit minus front, it will do it correctly here. You'll see it this way. It'll punch through just fine. Sometimes what you get is you get the object only punching one through like that. And it actually deletes. It deletes the horseshoe. So if we do Command Y, we see it, but it's completely deleted and I can't select it. So to find it again, you could select this object, go up to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And you'll see that that object appears again. So this filled object, the one with the circle punched out, and the tail fin was covering up the piece that wasn't included when we punched through. Now let's select the orange. Let's hold down Shift, select this object, and we can hit the minus front again, and we can get this now as a see-through object. So it's looking really cool. I like this. I like where it's going. We have half of it selected. That's fine. Let's go ahead and do one more thing to get this crab working. So we're going to first take everything, select around it, and we're going to create what is called, actually we're going to group it to start with. Command G to group. It now sees these elements all as one unit. So we can move it around. Let's put it back where it was so it kind of aligns with the sketch if we ever need to go back. So we got that like that. Let's select it, and we can see that this isn't a straight line. So if we were to mirror things right now, let's just go ahead and do it. Let's get the reflect tool over here from the tools panel, reflect tool. You can see it, it's got two arrows on either side of this dotted line. And if we hold down the Option key, actually let's do Command U first. So what is Command U? These are called smart guides. They help you to align things. So you can come up in here and see Command or Control U, Control on the PC. You will find that you will toggle on and off smart guides when you do that, when you do Command U or Control U. Those help you at different times to land precisely. It creates a little bit more precision in your artwork. So you can see we get these little tool tips popping up. It says anchor, anchor. This is a path that we're over. It's giving you information now in Smart Guides mode about each one of these points and these elements or these parts. So Option, when we're in Reflect tool, O on your keyboard, if you hold down the Option key and click on Anchor, this one that's right in the middle, it's the furthest most out too. You can see it flipped it along the vertical axis. We could flip along the horizontal axis, so it would be upside down. We're going to do the vertical axis, and to make things very easy, we just hit the copy button here. So it takes the original and it makes a copy on the other side of this point. This is the center point here, the center anchor. That's not what we want. We want the body to be closed up in here. Don't really like what's going on there. So Command Z. So how do we do that? Well, we already did a few techniques that can be helpful. We're going to select this anchor. So I'm here in the direct selection tool. We're going to select this anchor. I am still in this mode. So Smart Guides mode. I'm going to take this anchor and I'm going to come right up to the top anchor, and it says line extension, and I'm going to bring it down. What it does is it sees that as being an origin point, and we can now align it on that anchor. So it's having a little difficulty here, but I actually want the body to somewhat go in there, maybe a little bit, so it's not so straight at the bottom. So we can go ahead and do that. And then I'm just going to use my arrow key to kind of tweak things on my keyboard. So we know that it's now aligned. Here's another technique. Let's go Command Z a couple times back. There we go. Regroup it. So we could bring this all the way out. And then what we'll do is we'll come up to our rectangle tool. We'll position it in Smart Guides mode over top of the anchor. And as soon as it's over top of the anchor, we're going to draw out a box. Let's just to see that things are different. Let's make it yellow. So we know that this rectangle is perfectly vertical here. It has a 90-degree angle. And what we want to do is we want to extend it just a little bit above like that. Select the crab, and then we're going to minus front. Oh, what happened? So it saw everything in grouped mode. Even though it was grouped, it went ahead and took the topmost object, which was this circle in this case, and left that and minused everything else. Let's undo subtract. So how do we get around that? Well, we can use the direct selection tool, select just that shape and the orange shape now, minus front, and it will delete it properly. So we can do that. If you have a very complex illustration, you can, being that this is still grouped, you can come up to Object, Compound Path, Make. And you didn't see anything change, but it took everything and created it as one object. Remember the stacking order. So everything is now one object. Now if we select by shift clicking on the orange and doing minus front, we're able to delete that shape. So that's the ways that you can do it. I prefer the first one just because I don't want to always have to make things into a compound shape while I'm working on them. So I actually prefer using direct selection tool and then using minus front from there, or the Shapebuilder tool to delete it. So now we have this perfect crab. We know this is completely vertical now because we used a rectangle to achieve that and then subtracted the rectangle. So final step here, let's move this over a little bit. I'm just holding down my shift or my space bar and moving the screen over just a little, just kind of moving the board over. Let's take this and do exactly what we were doing before. So reflect tool, we'll come over top of that anchor, hold down the Option or Alt key on the PC. We'll get the reflect menu here, the dialog box. We want it vertical. The angle is 90 degrees. Preview is on just so we can see the result, and we'll hit copy. And when we do that, everything is removed. Okay. So I know that this is relatively straight here. Well, it is straight, it's horizontal, and same with here. So I actually want to move it over just a little bit. Let's do the left arrow key. Just a little bit. I can't go this far because it'll start to show on the other side. But I can go as far as this, right somewhere in here. I think the cleanest result is going to be right about in here. So it looks kind of weird because it's selected, but if we deselect, you can see it looks completely normal now. I really like that. So now I have this shape over here, and I have this shape over here. Now, if we look in the appearance panel, we can see it's a group. Same with this, a group. What I like to do is make them both compound paths now. So I go to Object, Compound Path, Make, and it now shifts in the appearance panel to compound path. This one over here is still a group, but this one is now a compound path. Again, that means everything is seen as one object in the same stacking order. Here we go here, compound path. Now we have a compound path here, separate from this one. So the last step that I do is combine the two. We want it to be one object. So let's select this one, shift click to select this one. And now we can come into the Pathfinder panel, hit Unite. And now it's one object. It's now gone back to group. And we can now take the final piece of artwork and make another compound path. And why do we do that? It's so we can do different effects now. So we can have multiple fills in the appearance panel. We could change the fill color. We could put a stroke around it. There's a lot of stuff you can do in the appearance panel that I'm not covering here. But if you look up on YouTube and you look for appearance panel, There's so much great stuff you can do with it, and it gets fairly complex. But a lot of things are done that way using the appearance panel. So we have this blue crab here. He's looking kind of big. That's good. I like that. It's looking really good. And maybe I want to put some type in there. Let's pick something. I think I know which one I want to do. Well, let's pick some type that maybe goes with it. So how do we determine? I like this bio rhyme. I just think it's friendly. But how do we determine it? What type to use? Well, you can kind of tell. There's every logo, every, I shouldn't say logo, but every symbol, every icon here has a feeling to it. Whether it's friendly or aggressive, you could really come up with many different words. So really trying to find a typeface that complements that is where you want to go. So let's just call this blue. I'm going to use all uppercase. We have a slab serif typeface. And maybe I keep it relatively the same. Let's open up that spacing just a little bit. I'm going to tighten it in between. I'll put my cursor in there and then hold down Option and my back arrow tool. I'm going to just make it 2 words, but I want it to be a little bit tighter in here. I'm going to tighten that up just a little. So blue crab, maybe we'll make it a little bigger. And I'm going to reduce it. Holding down my Option and Shift key so I can scale from the center. I still have this construction lines on, the smart guys. Command U, that'll turn them off. And I'm going to make this a restaurant. It just seems like a nice, or maybe we'll call it Seafood Grille. And we'll do grill spelled that way. Yeah. And just for contrast, I'm going to go to a sans serif. And we can kind of play around and see what might look appropriate. That actually looks pretty cool. Kind of like that. Let's do that. I like how this A kind of looks like a shark fin or something. So let's bring that up here. Let's just increase the size a little bit. I'm holding down just my Shift key and scaling things. And now I'm going to take both, select both, Command Shift C to center the two together. And they're not centered together, but each one, you can see this dot in the middle right here. That means it's centered text. And now I will use my Align panel. So Align, I will say Align Objects, Horizontal, Align Center. And there we go. So that's a mathematical center. There are cases where you'd want to do optical centering. So that might work there, like that. That looks pretty good. Obviously this crab is gigantic. Let's make it smaller. So I'm just showing you how you could build this a little bit. I like that the little tail fins almost look like wheels, or they look like even plates or something, or eyes, or I don't know, it's kind of neat. So this might be the horizontal version of the logo. And let's see what a stacking version would look like. So we're going to take this. I'm going to do, because these are 4, each of these words have 4 letters to them. Maybe I'll do that, and I'll close up the spacing, the leading here. So let's just make it 41 so it's fairly solid. So 41 over 41 would be solid. Let's go to negative leading. That's looking pretty good. Maybe we tuck this in. I don't know if this is going to look well, but it's okay. I feel like it's almost forced a little bit though. So I'm going to, even though I thought it was a good idea, I'm going to go ahead and do that. You could also put it off to the side. I don't think that works well because it's fairly symmetrical, or it is symmetrical. I don't know. Maybe we go back to this again, give it a shot. I like how it's kind of like a little roof or something. And then we'll put Seafood Grille in here. not the best positioning right now. So since I'm still in the design stage of this, I might be able to make some, take creative license with things. Maybe stretch the crab a little bit, or make it more vertical like that. It's not terrible. I just think it's not balanced just yet. It's getting there, but yeah, pretty big. If you were to scale this down though, real small, if you would go like that on a business card, it just doesn't look right. I think the crab has too much importance. So it's really just a game of playing with scale, the relationship of everything, just to see how things work. And maybe stacked isn't the right way to do it like that. Maybe there's another way to get around it. Sometimes people put things in a shape. This is looking better, actually, I think. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, that really concludes. You got a little treat there. You got a little me showing you just ideas for how it could be positioned. Maybe you put this together like that. And then if you wanted to do a reversed out version, let's just say we wanted white on blue in this case, you could take this, all of this, let's just make it white in this case. It'll work well because the reason why it'll work well is because it's already fairly geometric. It's shape based. It doesn't have a lot going on, but you can see there. So maybe you have something like that. Maybe the claws or the eyes or the fins are used as a pattern in something. That's often done. You can get a pattern. But that's it. That's really how it looks. Kind of neat. So we got the stacked version. We got this horizontal version. This still would work pretty well, actually. I think I like it better than this one. But if you needed something more vertical, you could. And again, it's reversed out now in white, and it works pretty well. So that's it. Very last thing, I should have been doing this all along, but to save it, save your document. I haven't saved one time yet, but that's all right. Okay, because we can always recreate it if we have to. It doesn't take that long. So that's it. I just wanted to show you this, how everything works, how you can knock shapes out of shapes, other shapes. Again, you can use the Pathfinder panel. You could use the Shapebuilder tool. There's other people that show you how to do that. I showed you just some basic things in this video that I think could be helpful. So that's it. All right. Thanks for watching.